Today we're revisiting an Aussie news story that had a global impact. You'll hear how it unfolded directly from the journalist who brought it to us.
7 years ago, reporter Mike Duffy exposed an overseas contractor caught using forced labour making clothes for a sportswear giant. The undercover investigation made global headlines and earned the 7 News reporter worldwide recognition.
It's no great secret that designer sportswear is made in remote factories by poorly paid workers. But what's going on here in Malaysia is something altogether more sinister.
In 2008, 7 News reporter Mike Duffy began an investigation into slave labourers in Malaysia.
An hour's drive from Kuala Lumpur is Hi-Tex Apparel, reputedly the largest T-shirt manufacturer in Asia. It's a Nike contractor. Cameras are banned here, but posing as a fashion buyer, I gain access to the factory.
Mike then sought out the living conditions of the workers.
We're led down a filthy corridor, past people sleeping, people eating. They're crammed like cattle, 26 men per room. They work 6 days a week for just 45 Australian dollars.
Following his investigation, the sportswear giant took action.
Immediately following our report on 7 News last night, Nike flew an investigation team to Malaysia. And in a written statement, it declared their housing unacceptable and promised to move hundreds of workers out of overcrowded accommodation.
The housing was shut down and the workers were moved to private apartments. And the investigation earned Mike Duffy an International Human Rights Award.
And 7 News reporter Mike Duffy joins us to reflect on that story. Welcome to the show, Mike. Great to have you.
Hey.
Mate, what led you to this investigation?
Well, we were looking into the exploitation of workers here in Australia, Australian companies, Australian labels, not doing the right thing by Australian workers, and in most cases, migrants to Australia, people without the language or knowledge to drive a fair bargain for themselves. And that story was something that went well for us. But during that, somebody got in touch with us and said, hey, look, good story, but there's something more serious going on in Malaysia.
What went through your mind when you walked through that factory in Malaysia?
Well, it's interesting. The factory itself was fine, was brightly lit. The people seemed to be working at decently spaced areas. It's what they would show to the business partners, what they would show in the pamphlet, as it were. But it's only when you go behind the scenes into where these people were living. The only way I can really explain it to you is they were like cattle sheds. It just didn't look like human living conditions at all. And what made it even worse was that these people couldn't leave. They were forced to be there.
The investigation made world news. What happened after that?
Well, Nike sent an investigation team of their own to Malaysia to have a look at what was going on, and very quickly worked out that at the very least the housing wasn't up to their standards, and at the very worst this was a very clear case of forced labour, you know, people who had got themselves into a situation where they literally couldn't leave. They closed down the shed facilities and moved these people into apartments, which was terrific.
How fulfilling was it for you that the investigation helped to liberate 1,200 exploited workers?
Well, it was great. I mean, so often you do show some of the worst things that happen, but there isn't improvement in their life. In this case, it was really rapid for them, and yeah, that was really satisfying and even a surprise to all of us involved, I think.
Yeah. Of course, this was going on in 2008. Generally speaking, do you think this conduct is still happening?
Well, I won't speak about Nike. I mean, they say they've improved this situation, but broadly, absolutely. You know, many of the things that you would be able to go to the mall and buy today would be made under conditions that none of us would think were at all fair to the workers who made them. And I think people should ask more questions about the way the things they buy are produced, and when that starts to happen, things will change.
Okay. The story earned you a Global Television Award for the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What is it like to receive an honour like that?
It was great. I mean, it's always great to be recognised for your work. But I guess the overall response to the story, what it really proved to me was, and I'm from a newspaper background, but what it really taught me was that television can have a real impact. You know, it can take people to these things that are happening, show them, and perhaps encourage or even force them to change what they're doing.
Yeah, so true.
Of course, you were congratulated by former US President Jimmy Carter. What was it like to meet him, and how do you look back on that moment?
I mean, it was a great moment, but almost with a little bit of embarrassment. I mean, I think I was a little bit starstruck. I'm not afraid to say it's something that it's a very short conversation, but one that I'll remember for the rest of my life. But I don't know whether he'll remember it as one of the great conversations he's had. Yeah.
What did he say to you?
He said, "Great story," and I think I smiled and actually waved at him. I'm not sure it was much of a response at all.
No photo?
Well, it's there. I think you can see it. Yeah.
And before selfies too,
Yeah.
Mike. So yes.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah.
Good on you, Mike.
Well done,
Thank you.
mate. Thanks very much for sharing that story with us. Stick around, there's a whole lot more of the Daily Edition right after this.